It's a cold February morning, 4:40 a.m. to be exact. 911 dispatch gets a phone call from a frantic young man named Timmy Dees. He had traveled to Fredericktown, Missouri with a friend named Caleb, and now he was being threatened by him and needed help. Police arrive on the scene a few minutes later, and Timmy was nowhere to be found. Strangely, the officer doesn't even look for the distraught young man and instead arrests another man who had an outstanding warrant. None of this made any sense to Timmy's mom. Why didn't they look for her son when he had obviously called for help? They wouldn't help her either when she arrived on their doorstep and begged them to look for her son. They said he was of age and probably ran off. 5 months later, Timmy's body would be found a mere 184 yards away from where he had made that frantic phone call. To this day, police cannot tell this mother what happened to her son. Perhaps he laid down to take a nap and died. Perhaps he was running from something and fell and hit his head. Perhaps he OD'd on drugs. Nobody can tell her anything, and nobody wants to help. What happened to Timmy Dees in the wee hours of February 28, 2022?
We're going to be talking to victim's mother today. Her name's Barbara Hall. Her son is one of the stories and cases that we've been talking about, trying to raise awareness about. His name is Timmy Dees. So, hello, Cricket. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
Doing all right. Hello, Barbara. How are you?
I'm wonderful. How are you?
We're good. We're glad that you could get on with us. My fellow research assistant that's usually on my True Crime Tuesday show, Tammy, she was disappointed. She had already made plans for today, and so she wasn't going to be able to join us. She's like, I've been wanting to meet Barbara. And I was like, well, you'll have to watch the video. So there we go. We all appreciate all of the work that Barbara does. She works really hard on her son's case, but she has a compassionate heart, and she works on everybody's case, and she tries to raise awareness. She's at all the events with all the signs, trying to help every victim's mother she can. So not only is she a victim's mother, she's also a victim's advocate in her own right. So we give kudos to her. I believe giving people flowers while they're living, not after they're dead on their casket. So there's flowers for you, Barbara. So we're going to jump right in and talk about Timmy Dees. Now, Timmy Dees is the son of Barbara, who's on the line with us. Basic overview of the case. There's so many details we could go into. We could spend hours talking about this case, but a basic overview is Timmy was 25 years old. He traveled to Fredericktown, Missouri, with a friend named Caleb on February 28th of 2022. Now, he called 911 at approximately 4:40 a.m. He called 911 saying he was being threatened by his friend, and he feared for his safety and his life. So 911, there was a problem with the call. It was not recorded. Also, the standard procedure of someone staying on the line with you was not followed either. So they showed up 8 minutes later, according to the police reports. An officer showed up at the location 8 minutes later. Caleb wasn't seen, and Timmy Dees wasn't seen. They talked to someone at the house, and they found out that one man at the house had warrants out for his arrest. So instead of following through and doing their due diligence and looking for the man that actually made the phone call, they decide to get distracted and arrest the man that had warrants for his arrest, and then they leave. No one looks for Timmy Dees, and the mother is left alone to fight to try to get someone to help her. No one helps her. She has to fight for everything she does. She does finally get the right to search a few times against what the police really want to do. She herself ended up having to bring in search dogs. And there was all kinds of hindrance with this mother just trying to get her voice heard. No one wanted to investigate. They said he was of age, so they were basically closing the case before it was ever opened. Unfortunately, Timmy's body would be found a few months later. I believe it was it 4 months or 5 months, Barbara?
5 months.
5 months later, and I got it July 21st, 2022, less than 200 yards from where he made that phone call. So less than 200 yards from the feet of the police officer who arrived on scene, this boy's body was found. And he was completely decomposed at that point. He was all skeletal remains. He had some strange things left with him in his pockets, and there was all kinds of unusual things about this case. A debit card that was used after his disappearance, after his supposed demise. There's so many rabbit holes on this case that we could talk for hours, but this is a basic overview. He called 911 trying to get help. 911 does not stay on the call. They do not record the call. Then the police officer shows up, does not finish the job that he came there for, gets distracted with something else, and Timmy's body is found a short amount of space away from where that officer was. So is that a good overview for you, Barbara?
He was found 184 yards.
184 yards.
They were there in 5 minutes and was gone in 8.
Gone in 8.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So see, you get so many reports that are a little bit different. So I heard some reports 184 yards, some reports 187 yards, and I'm like, I don't care either way. That's within eyeball distance. You should have, that's within eyeball distance. You should be able to see 184 yards away if you were looking. And I think that's where I find this case disturbing. All of them are disturbing. So, I mean, well, disturbing is not a word. It's disturbing is where the lack of concern from law enforcement and the mistreatment of the mother is what I find the most disturbing about this case. How did you, when this all happened, let's go back to when you got the phone call. What happened? How did you find out that your son was gone?
Well, I didn't hear from him. And that was unusual because I had lost my older son just prior to that. And Timmy, for him to have not called me every day was not normal. And then I didn't get a phone call. I went to church. I came home and I just got physically sick. I knew something was wrong. So I made a missing persons report where I live. And that's where Monroe comes in. The detective Monroe got Timmy's case from Jefferson County where I live. He was wonderful. I have documents from him that the Highway Patrol never even gave me. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't know about the debit card being used. There's just so many things I wouldn't have known if it wasn't for the detective here. Right. But because he had to drive so far down there, he handed it over to the Highway Patrol.
Right. Which is standard procedure, actually. Because it's out of his jurisdiction. So he didn't do anything wrong by doing that.
He did a wonderful job.
But the problem with it is he handed it over to part of the problem.
Right.
Is where it goes. So tell me, how did I know how you were received when you tried to go to Fredericktown and get help? Tell the audience, how were you received when you show up there for the first time or you make the first phone call? How were you received? How did they treat you?
Well, the first day when I realized he was missing in Fredericktown, I called down there numerous times for a whole day. Right. And every time I called, they would tell me they would have a deputy call me back, and they never did. They would not call me back. So finally, that's probably the only time I really lost it. I called him back, and the lady says, well, we're going to have a deputy. And before she even finished, I started yelling. I'm not going to deny that. I started yelling at her, and I said, don't worry about it. I said, you're not going to have a deputy call me because I've been calling you all day and night because the whole first day I stayed home.
Yeah, because you was waiting on the call.
Right. Yeah. I said, but I'll tell you what. I said, I'll get your attention. I said, because I'm packing my car up right now and I'm coming down there. I said, and when I'm on your front steps, I said, then I'll get your attention because apparently you're not going to call me.
Right.
And I hung up the phone, packed my car up, and I left.
Right.
And I
And most
started,
likely you were talking to the same person most of those calls, because we're talking
yes.
Fredericktown. It's a small place. Where
Well,
Fredericktown has a total population of 4,000 people. So it isn't no big, you're not talking to 15 different people every time you call. You're not calling some mega call center where you've never talked to the same receptionist. You're talking to the same person most likely
oh,
all
I
day
talked to
long.
the same, yeah, I talked to the same person. I got to know her voice
Mm-hmm.
because she's the dispatch person from the sheriff's department.
Right. Well, and in all reality, she may have been sending through the message every time, but they just weren't responding, and they weren't going to do it. And so, in dealing with psychology and behavioral psychology is what I've been studying when I stepped away from true crime and criminal psychology. And I wanted to be a victim's advocate. I wanted to help victims' family members work through this horrible event to where they can still have some similitude of a life. And what you said you did when you called, and you called and you called multiple times, and then you got angry when you were dismissed again. All of that is within the realm of standard behavior. You didn't do anything out of the standard realm of a worried, stressed out, frantic mother. So you didn't do anything there to elicit the type of response that you've gotten from this police department.
Oh, it was devastating. I always had trust in all police enforcement, and I still do in a lot. I'm not going to say they're all bad because I've met a lot of good ones, but I was stunned that they did that.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of blew me away. And then when I showed up there and I rang their doorbell, because they don't have a door where you can just walk into the police station.
Mm-hmm.
There's a doorbell there.
Mm-hmm.
And I stood there for I don't know how long ringing their doorbell, and you can see the cameras looking at you. And I looked at my friend and I said, they're in there looking at me and trying to make a decision on who's going to come out and talk to me. I said, my friend started recording because it was going that way. That's why we have the recordings.
Right. Did they ever let you in, or did they come out to you?
He came out the door, freezing cold, and walked me away from the police station in the middle of the parking lot.
So basically, they were treating you as a threat risk right there.
Yes.
Because if they did not perceive you as a threat risk, they would have just let you in the door.
To warm up, if anything.
Yeah.
It was cold.
Yeah.
And I've been there all day handing out flyers.
Mm-hmm.
And
They
when
knew.
we first showed up there, that we even had one of the police officers give us the finger.
And see, this is where, and this is, I guess I'm like you. I was taught to bleed blue. And you expect someone who's wearing a badge to have a high level of integrity. You expect someone to have a badge to have some honor about them. To me, someone who wears a badge, that is a heroic thing to do, because you're putting your life at risk to protect other people. And when they don't measure up, it's disappointing. But when they completely fall off the wagon and mistreat you and can't even treat you like a fellow human being, it's devastating, because I feel like you don't deserve a badge if you can't have a level of integrity. If you can't withstand an angry mother every once in a while who's in a panic state about her child, if you can't handle that kind of risk, then what good are you? If you actually had someone that was of high risk come into your police office, your police station, if you can't handle an upset mother who's lost a child, then how are you going to handle anything else?
Well,
and so to me, it's dreadful.
Yeah, I did go off on that phone call, but once I got there, I don't believe in handing power over to other people to control.
No.
So, I lost it for a minute on the phone when she kept telling me that. But once I got down there, I was as polite as I could possibly be, because I wasn't going to let them have me go off and then treat me, because they wasn't treating me right anyway. So I wasn't going to let them have that power over me to make me lose it, to where you can say I'm just this crazy woman, because I know they've done that to other people.
Right. Well, and here's the thing. Did you, when you say you lost it, did you threaten physical or bodily harm to anyone in the police station when you lost it?
No, all I said, this is exactly what I said. All I said is, don't worry about having a deputy call me back, because you're not going to. I've been going through this all day. I said, I'll tell you what. I said, I'll get your attention when I show up there. And I hung up on him.
Yeah. So you didn't threaten any bodily or physical harm to anybody in that police station, and yet when you showed up, they were treating you as if you had. And see, this is where people need to understand. And I realize a lot of law officers, they're not trained in behavioral psychology. They're not trained in any kind of therapy or anything like that. But you still have to tap into your own human empathy. This is a mother who has lost her son, and to someone who cannot find her son, and they were last seen in your town. They last called you for help. This is all under the heading of reasonable behavior in my book. And if they can't see that that's reasonable behavior, then maybe they need to take a little bit more training. Because I don't necessarily think every cop over there is bad, or every sheriff over there is bad, or anything. I think a lot of times they don't seem to care about the people. They don't have very much empathy, it seems like. And they don't seem to have a lot of education in criminology. I was like, maybe you guys need to go back to school. Maybe it's a poor community and they need more resources. I always try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, but you don't need those things to be kind. You don't need those things to say, hey, this is a mom out here waving signs because her son's missing. It's cold out here. Let me bring her a cup of coffee. You don't need training or money or resources to be a kind human being. And I find that's very disturbing in this case. So let's go in and talk about, Cricket, do you have anything to add to that before we move to the next?
Well, one thing that really upsets me with this case, I'm a former member of a search and rescue team.
Yeah.
This was a highly controlled search.
Right.
Totally not the way it's done.
Yeah, we're going to get into, I want to get into the strange thing about, let's talk about the searches next. That's the next logical. So let's talk about the searches. How many searches were there? How did you get those taken care of? And did the police do any of them, or did you have to organize them all?
I organized the first 6.
First 6.
Yes.
Okay. So you organized 6 searches, okay?
And no police officers were there at all.
Now, this disturbs me because I'm always thinking about court cases. So on down the road, say somebody untrained finds something of significance. If they don't collect it properly, if they touch it, if they move it, if they don't record it properly, then on down the road, in a court of law, a defense attorney or a prosecuting attorney can tear that apart and dismiss that evidence because it wasn't collected by police, it wasn't collected properly, it was this or that. That gives them an arguing point of throwing it out. So in my mind, I would want as police to be on every search because I don't want the evidence to get messed up. I would have a representative from the police department involved in all the searches. And this is where I'm going to segue into what Cricket was saying and what she does, because she's actually a boots on ground searching for missing. She's actually done the boots on ground work. Basically, Cricket, from what I understand, I'm the writer, the researcher, I'm the psychologist, stuff that I study. You actually been boots on ground.
Yes.
Isn't it normal for having some kind of representative that comes from law enforcement, and they kind of give you an idea. Okay, everybody, we're going to spread out in a grid pattern, and they give you some little instructions. If you see something, don't touch it. Go get somebody. They give you a little bit of instruction so you know what to do. But there's usually somebody kind of overseeing the group to make sure it's done properly, isn't there?
Well, police aren't always there.
Okay.
And as a SAR person, like, we're trained, we know what to do. And
tell
when
people what a
there's
SAR person is.
Search and recovery or search and rescue,
Okay.
with the dogs and all that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Now, even though the police aren't there, the searches are very organized.
Mm-hmm.
If they want the public's help, they'll have a meeting place.
Mm-hmm.
They'll have a post command center.
Mm-hmm.
There's a map. You put people where you want them to go. But
right.
In each group, there should be a search and recovery member, somebody who is trained. And always we have to have the gloves,
mm-hmm.
because we pick up potential evidence.
Right.
We don't touch it with our hands. We pick
right.
it up with the gloves, and
right.
we also have different bags, But
right.
even if you don't, a lot of people always carry the gloves around anyway. But in that kind of situation, yes, always use gloves, because
right.
then you're not contaminating anything.
Right. So to me, it seems odd that there were 6 that, and I'm sure, Barbara, this wasn't pleasing to the police department that you were doing this. Did you get hassled by trying to search for your own son?
I begged them to even come out of that police station, and I'm sorry, this part is so hard.
That's okay.
Take your time.
I begged them to come out and just help me look for him. They would not do it. They told me I couldn't prove that he was missing there. And I said, I absolutely can, sir. I said, because he was alive and fine at the City Barn gas station.
Yeah.
And then I said, when he made a 911 call, and then he went from that to saying, well, you can't prove he made the 911 call. You need to go back to Jefferson City. This isn't our case. You need to go get him to do something. And I go, but sir, he's missing here. They never walked out of that police station to help me look for him. So I did not know. I got desperate. I'm not going to lie. I didn't know. So I called all Timmy's friends, my sister and her husband, mm-hmm. my
yep.
niece's husband.
Yep.
And then
everybody you could find.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, anybody that would come. And then a friend of mine, her niece, her husband is a fire chief in another little town close
mm-hmm.
to that. And he came because we had no idea what we were doing.
Absolutely. You needed somebody that had some training on this.
So he shows up and he said, what? He goes, do you guys know what we're doing? And I said, no, we have no idea what we're doing. He goes, do you mind if I take charge of this? I said, please do, because he was a chief of the fire department.
Yeah. Fire and rescue. He knows, he has some training. Yeah.
So we looked, and then on March the 13th, they have in the newspaper that's what they put in the newspaper, and I have the article where it says they're exhausted looking for him when they never looked for him.
Wow.
And that they didn't even know he was missing, that they were exhausted their resources looking for him on March 13th. But I know what happened on March 13th. March 13th, the guy from the chief of the fire department told me that he could get some cadaver dogs. He goes, but the only way I can get the cadaver dogs is if you get permission slips from the landowners. And I said, well, how do I do that? So he told me what I needed, printed out papers. I knocked on every door on March 13th. It's the same day they mm-hmm. put that in the newspaper when they weren't even there. They wouldn't even come out of that police department and look. It was stunned. Yeah. I was stunned. I just was like blown away that they would not come help, mm-hmm. do nothing.
They were trying to maintain the facade to the community that they were doing their job. But that's what it sounds like to me.
I mean, I was there. They did not one mm-hmm. police officer showed up with us to look. Not one. Not even stand back and like even watch or
Right.
anything.
Observe. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about you had, okay, now I know there's a story where you guys were searching and the dogs signaled on one storage unit and then another, and you were allowed to search one storage unit, and then law enforcement themselves blocked you from searching the unit that next to it that the dogs had hit on. So can you tell us that story and let the audience know about that?
Yes, the dogs hit on storage unit 5 and 6.
Okay.
And the man that was running this dogs, he would take the dogs away,
Mm-hmm.
and they would kept going back to those storage units.
Mm-hmm.
So a friend of mine, Jimmy, he was there. He sat on them storage units, and the guy that was running, that had the dogs, went to the sheriff's department to tell the sheriff's department that the dogs hit on them storage units.
Mm-hmm.
So he sat there and Jimmy until the police arrived.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the guy said he had to leave. They had the dogs. He had to take his dogs. So Jimmy sat there. The police showed up. They brought the lady that owned storage unit 5. They opened it. They let Jimmy look in there. And Jimmy said there was cobwebs and stuff there. You could tell that nobody had been in there for a while.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So then he asked to look at storage unit 6, and they told him it belonged to a police officer and a resource officer at the school, and that it had already been searched. Well, Jimmy said, no, it hasn't. I haven't left the spot. There's no way you guys could have searched it because I was here before you. And they insisted that they searched it. So Jimmy called the people that own the storage unit and asked the guy, and he said, just drive your car through the door. If you think he's in there, just drive your car through there. He says, no charge to you. He said, I'll replace the door.
Mm-hmm.
So, but the problem was the sheriff pulled her truck in front of that door.
Mm-hmm.
So you could not drive through that door if you wanted to because her truck was there. And then they put their hands on their guns and told him to leave, that it had been searched, and that he was going to be arrested if he didn't leave.
So
Wow.
they had permission of the person who was leasing that storage unit. They had the permission to not only enter it, but to destroy the property if they had to get in there. And yet the police would not let them.
Absolutely. They said we could drive our vehicle through the door. If they didn't want to open it, to drive the vehicle through their door if we thought he was in there because them cadaver dogs hit on that storage unit.
And see, to me, that is standard of any human with any kind of heart whatsoever. They're like, yeah, it's my storage unit. I don't know how anything could get in there, but if you think your missing child is in there, bust the door down and get in there. That is a standard response, I think, of any common logical thinking person that says, hey, if this person's child is missing and could be in there, by all means get in there.
Right.
And so that makes me wonder why the police were so adamant, no, you can't search this, when they have permission to search it. And in all reality, why didn't the police search it? If they were saying, okay, well, you can't search it, we'll search it. Okay, get out your bolt cutters and go get in there and see what it is. They didn't want you behind that door.
Exactly,
Right.
because if the property owner gave you permission and to knock it down if you had to, why are the cops reaching for their guns when there would be no charges when they had permission to destroy it if they needed to?
Right. Absolutely.
Well, the police actually could have called the police officer that owned the storage unit and had him come open it, but they would
Absolutely.
not do that.
Yeah.
So that's why Jimmy called the storage unit owner. But shoot, if she wouldn't have had her truck there, believe me, we'd have drove through that door.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what she knew, so she put her truck there. Yes. Okay, so tell us now about when was Timmy found, how was he found, who was conducting the search that day?
A highway patrol they did the search, and I think it's a little strange that Mike Busking is the guy that they did the last interview with. And he says in that interview, which I have on recording, that he said, you'll find that kid, I'm telling you, within a mile radius. He said, he's probably not going to have clothes on because I think he's probably died of hypothermia. And then they closed the case pretty much right after that. Did not tell me they closed the case. I went to see them on August the 12th, and they talked to me like the case was still open. Well, then when I got my documents, they had already closed the case. They didn't even tell me it was closed. And it was just kind of strange that they did this. I don't call them interrogations because they sound like interviews to me. And this guy tells them all this stuff, and then they find him. They did that search and found him.
Well, I'm trying to look up here, see if I can find Fredericktown's weather history for July of 20.
I already looked up the history at 4:40 in the morning. When he made the 911 call, it was 47 degrees.
Now, a hyperthermia is when your body overheats. He says he shouldn't have clothes on because he died of hyperthermia. Hypothermia is when you're too cold.
That's what I said.
Hyperthermia is when you're too hot. So if he died of hypothermia, it would have had to have been colder than 47 degrees. He was found in July, so I'm thinking, okay, so how hot was it in July? So I'm trying to figure out July 21st, it looks like it was 88 degrees.
Yes, and it got up to 100 degrees at some points in those months because I sat there at that courthouse and got sunburned.
So my point is it wasn't cold enough for him to get hypothermia or hyperthermia. It would have had to been a whole lot hotter. So it wasn't in the weather range when he went missing of either one of those things. It didn't get cold enough at night for him to freeze to death. It didn't get hot enough during the day for him to overheat and die of heat exhaustion or heat stroke.
Well, and people don't call 911 unless they feel like their life is in danger.
They don't die.
And they want to live.
Yeah, exactly. So that, so none of that makes sense. So basically he told them all these things, and then all of a sudden they find him on July 21st. How do you find out that your son has been found?
At 8:30 that morning, they got there at 8 o'clock. At 8:30 in the morning, Timmy's dad had called me and asked me what Timmy's shoes looked like because they found his shoe. And I described his shoe, but I was with Timmy when he bought the shoes. So I knew exactly what shoes he had on. He left my house. He had the same clothes on that he left my house in. So I knew everything he was wearing.
Right.
And they found that shoe, and they had Timmy's dad call me and ask me what the shoe looked like. I tried to describe the shoe. So Timmy's dad said, I'll tell you what, I'm going to send you a picture of the shoe. He sent me the picture of the shoe. When I saw the shoe, I lost it because I knew it was Timmy's shoe. No. Well, then they told Timmy's dad to leave, and they searched a little longer. Like I said, at 8 o'clock they were there. They found Timmy by 8:35.
So they had a pretty good idea where he was.
Yeah, but because they had that interview with Mike Busking. But when I asked,
to me, that doesn't really make a lot of sense because saying that he would be found within a mile radius of where the 911 call came from, that's typical. That's not uncommon. But the fact that it happened the next day, that's weird.
The guy that I'm talking about, though, was one of the guys that was there. So
he was the Mike that was at the house.
Right.
Oh, okay. See, I thought the way you said it before, I thought Mike Buskey was someone in the sheriff's department. Okay, no, so you're saying they talked to someone that was at that house that night, and he said those things.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, now that makes a little more sense. I'm sorry, I wasn't following you along very well. Okay, so they say they go back and talk to one of the men that were in that house that night, and he gives them all this random information, and then all of a sudden they find the body, and it's literally 100 and did you say 182 or 184 yards?
184 yards.
184 yards from where he made the phone call.
He's the one that was passed out allegedly the whole time, right?
Yeah, but in that interview when he's talking, well, it's an interrogation supposed to be, but when they talk to him, I've got the whole audio, and he's telling them that Caleb's saying he never saw his face, but then Mike is admitting that he met Timmy that night and talked to Timmy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And well, all three of them were in that house. Trevor and Caleb and Mike were all in that house, supposedly, and Timmy was there. So how big was this house, or was you unconscious? Because I'm sure it wasn't such a huge house. They didn't happen to run into each other. They were probably smoked up on something and passed out. If they didn't see Timmy, how could you not see him? Well, it wasn't a big place.
The thing is that kind of confused me was that house is there, but Caleb had it's like a storage unit he was trying to make into a tiny house that's right next to that lady. That's her property, and she let Caleb put that there. So Caleb and them were in that place.
So it was kind of like one of those barn houses that people try to make houses out of, like the storage shed barn type thing. So he was trying to make a miniature version of that. On like the other person's property. So they were in a tiny house.
Yes.
So they weren't even in a normal sized house. They were in a tiny house. And he says he didn't see him. So the only way you couldn't see him is if you were passed out.
Well, that's the strangest thing, because I did the sunshine law for the recordings of Caleb on the phone in the jailhouse. Mm-hmm. They gave me, I can't even prove, I don't even think they gave me all, but I can prove they did not give me the ones of Caleb and I talking. Mm-hmm. I've even had records of the times, the dates, how many minutes we talked and everything. Mm-hmm. And I told them I wanted those recordings because Caleb kept changing his story every time he talked to me. Mm-hmm. But I didn't get those. I called the Iron County Police Department, asked them about it, and I did 2 sunshine law requests to them, because I did one sunshine request that was just asking for the information.
Right.
And I didn't get that, and then I took a screenshot of this app that I have that showed the dates, the times, and everything, how many times Caleb and I talked. Right. And when I screenshotted that and did another sunshine law request, I didn't get that either. And so I called them, and I did certified letter when I sent those. So when I called her, an M. Yunt signed for those. When I called that police, and I got it recorded, because I started recording everything after some of this. So the guy starts, when I asked for M. Yunt, because that was the person that signed for my sunshine law request, and they said, there's no M. Yunt here. There's never been an M. Yunt here, and there never will be. And I go, well, I'm a little confused. I said, because I'm looking at my paper for the tracking number, and I says it shows an M. Yunt signed for this paper. And then you can hear them in the recording mumbling between each other about how I have a document. I just stood back and just listened and recorded, because I was stunned that they were even mumbling between each other that I had this document. Mm-hmm. And so then this lady gets on the phone, and she says, well, I didn't get the sunshine law request. I can't find it. She said, will you email me another one? And I said, okay. So I emailed her 3 times, and it wouldn't go through. So I had to call back again, ask him for the email. Finally got the email, sent it to him. I waited 3 days, called him back. I said, did you get my email? Yes, we did. And then another person got on the phone and started yelling at me, telling me that they don't have to give me anything. They talked to their lawyer. They're not going to give me any. I mean, he's yelling at me. I got it recorded. He's yelling at me, telling me he doesn't have to give me nothing. And I said, well, sir, I said, I did, because I'm not going to yell back. I mean, I did the one time. But I
Yeah.
never
It
did
don't
that
do you
again.
any good. So.
Right. And I wasn't going to let them make me out to be some,
Hmm.
woman
Yep.
because I've done that before.
Yep.
So I
They
said,
like to label lunatic women, people as, out of control lunatic women. And I'm like, no, sometimes women just get angry and they have a right to be. And then they label you that, and then they can call you that and dismiss you. So you were
well,
doing right by trying to stay calm.
so I said, well, sir, I said, I have a video of Caleb. He goes, how did you get that video? You shouldn't have that video. And I said, well, sir, I said, I got the video because Caleb sent me the video talking to me.
Yeah.
And then he calmed down and he goes, well, I talked to my lawyer. My lawyer said I don't have to give you anything. And I said, okay, sir, because I didn't know what else to do. And I'm that
Yeah.
into that conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. And it
Yeah,
basically is. You couldn't have done anything else.
yeah, and they
So,
wouldn't be getting that upset if they weren't hiding something.
right. Well, and so let's get into what we're doing now. Okay, so I want to, we could talk about this all day long, and there are so many rabbit trails that we haven't gone down yet. Just talking about the fact that his debit card was used after we think he was already deceased. We've got receipts and things showing that. We've got strange things coming up in his pocket, like a tracking device that shows somebody wanted to keep track of that body somehow. There's all kinds of strange things that we can continue to talk about this case, but this video is a very specific purpose behind this video. We want you guys to know as a audience. I know you watch gobs of these videos. You might research these cases, you might research them, you might watch all kinds of true crime content. But most of the time, there is very little that you can physically do to help in a situation. And this time, that is not the case. We have something physically that everybody that watches this video can do to help Barbara out. Now, Barbara has started a petition. Now, this petition she is needing signatures on to help open up Timmy's case again, because this is not he didn't just run away from that house, lay down in a field, and lay there till he died, and then lay there for 5 months till they find him. We know that that is not a logical explanation to what happened to this kid. Now, I call him a kid, he's 25. He's technically an adult,
To me
but
too, yeah.
he's a kid to me. But my thought on it is, how many times have you guys watched this and your heart swells with empathy for the families in this case, but there's nothing you can do? In this case, you can do it. So the whole purpose of this video is to let Barbara have a chance to come to you as the audience personally and ask you for help. So Barbara, tell people why you're getting signatures, how important each signature is, and how much it means to you when people will come in and sign this for you.
It's very important to me because there's so many unanswered questions. And they just closed the case and told me pretty much to go away, that I'm a delusional, grieving mother that just can't accept her son's death. But they gave me 4 different stories 4 days after he was found. And and then when I questioned their stories, because the first story was that they think that they found the shoe and that Timmy ran out of a shoe. And I said, well, I don't understand that, sir. I said, because my son loved his shoes. I know how he was with his shoes. I helped him clean those shoes before he left my house with an old toothbrush. Mm-hmm. I said, and he would have not. And I said, somebody had to have been chasing him for him to leave his shoe. And then they said, well, they went from that story to telling me that he froze to death. And I said, well, if his shoe was off and he was, because they said he ran out of his shoes. I said, well, if he ran out of his shoes, then he had to been being chased, because he wouldn't have left a shoe behind.
No.
And then they said, well, we think he just froze to death. And I said, well, that doesn't make sense to me either, sir. I said, it wasn't that cold for one. I said, and if you're telling me he ran out of his shoes, you get warmer when you run. You don't freeze.
Yeah.
And then they told me, well, we think he just laid down and died. and took some pills and he OD'd. And I said, well, sir, I have a hard time believing that. And then I said, well, what about the shoes? And then they said the current was so strong that it took the shoes right off of his body. And I said, well, sir, I do a lot of fishing. I love to fish. I said, and I've been to a lot of creeks. I said, and I've never seen the water that powerful that it takes shoes right. I mean, maybe flip-flops, but not shoes off of a person's body. Right. I said, and if the current was that strong, I said, why would his shoes be there? Did the current just suddenly was so strong it took the shoes right off his body and then the current stopped and left his shoes? It doesn't make any sense. And then they said, well, then they started talking about that they thought he died from hypothermia. And then they started telling me that we know it's not a homicide and that I'm not going to reason with them. And there's no point in talking to me anymore because I'm just not going to reason with what they have to say. And I said, sir, it's only been 4 days. I said, the autopsy report's not even in yet. And you're already calling me, telling me these different stories. I said, well, we don't know what happened. The autopsy report's not even in. And his exact words were to me, you're not going to listen or reason with anything that we have to say. And so there's no point in talking to you anymore. And I said, sir, you're not giving me a reasonable explanation is the problem. And then he hung the phone up. Right. And after that conversation, I immediately went out and bought a recorder because I was so stunned over that conversation that I didn't think anybody would believe me because it's hard to believe.
Right.
So
that
thought,
a professional would act that way is so it's unbelievable. So, you're trying to collect signatures to get Timmy's case reopened. You have a petition available, and we're going to link it in the video description here. I'm going to post it on my true crime group, Crickets on the Line. She's going to post it to hers. We ask you all to sign this petition because this petition, if we can get enough signatures on it, we have a chance of getting Timmy's case opened again. And if we can get a big enough public outcry, it will force the hands of those that don't want to help. And that's what we need to do. And so, by doing this, you can physically help in a cold case, not a cold case, it's just an unsolved case, but you can physically help someone in need with this case. And so, Cricket, I haven't heard a lot from you. Do you have anything to add before we get off of here?
Well, it just really breaks my heart. Barbara should not have been treated that way. The police definitely didn't do anything.
No, and to me, I feel like that's the reason why I wanted to revisit this case. Of course, I'm working on this case and some others behind the scenes, but we already made a video about it, so I'm like, I want to make another one and talk to Barbara personally. So I thank you, Barbara, for coming on. I know it's hard to talk about this, and we get to points where it's emotional for you to talk about this. If I could do more, I'd do more. If I had a way of forcing their hand and making them do what they're supposed to do, I would. If I had the answers, I'd give them to you in a heartbeat. And I think most of the people that watch my content feel the same way. So I'm going to ask everybody that watches this video, I need you to do 2 things. One, I need you to share the video so more people can see it and more people can sign the petition. And I need you to go follow the link in the video description and sign the petition for us. Because the more signatures we get on there, the more we can push this department to do what they're supposed to do. If there's enough public outcry, they will do what they're supposed to do, whether they like it or not. And that's kind of where we're at.
Well, that was the main reason why I made the petition in the first place, was because all I ever wanted was for somebody to just look at it and do a proper investigation. That's all I want. I mean, you do a proper investigation and you sit down with me and give me a reasonable explanation for all this, I would not have a problem with listening, but nobody gave me the time of day to sit down with me and explain all these unanswered questions. And the big one is that his tooth was out and they put his tooth back in his mouth. And they never even documented it.
Yeah.
Why did they put a tooth in his mouth?
Right. There's so many things that's wrong with the crime scene photos. There's so many things wrong between the photos that you took at the coroner's office and then the photos that they gave you. There's so many. Like I said, we could talk about this for days. And Barbara, if you want to get on and we can talk about very specific things about the case and make a series of videos, I'll do that too. But this video is specifically asking you to please share it and please sign the petition. We need your help, and I have faith in my audience that we can make a difference in this case. So I'm going to say goodbye. Girls, tell everybody bye.
And so much.
Yep, we'll sign off here.
Bye, guys. Kimberly, it was so nice talking to you.
Kimberly, Barbara.
I mean, sorry.